Hello, everyone, and welcome to GodSaw's Turnbuckle, the wrestling video podcast I run over here on YouTube.com. And I'm going to be very frank on this one. We're going to talk about a subject I have not talked about on here, at least in the sense of this particular show, because I have talked about AEW on here, especially with doing reviews for the pay-per-views. We did have a Full Gear review that was over here, and I've done reviews on my other channels as well. For AEW. But the one thing that we have not talked about this entire time has been AEW Dynamite. It started at the beginning of October. It's been going on for about 3 months now. I'm filming this on December 29th, so it's about 3 months as of their January 1st show. And I thought this was a good time to kind of talk about AEW and where it's been going and how I feel about the show and what is it like, where is it good, where is it bad, where is it it's just okay to go along with that. And there are definitely areas that I will say that AEW Dynamite is a fantastic show on those particular ones, and a very good wrestling product for the Wednesday night area. Honestly, you would even have to say, especially for the hardcore fans themselves, that Wednesday nights are probably the best wrestling nights of the week with AEW and NXT. We're not going to talk about NXT on this particular one, but we are going to be focusing just on AEW Dynamite. And one of the things that I wanted to go in there and kind of grasp where we are about 3 months in. Where are where is everything with this particular show? And when AEW essentially started, it did start with a massive groundswell, and it has that hardcore base of fans, people who know a lot of the independent names that are going on to the show, and people who are getting exposed to these names for the first time on this particular side. And I've kind of I'll basically say that you kind of got certain areas with the show itself. So in the sense of everything here, you got two guys who you would consider mainstream wrestling stars, with Chris Jericho and Jon Moxley. They are the mainstream ones. The people, if you talk about people who at least know something about current day wrestling, they probably know something about Jon Moxley, at least in the terms of a Dean Ambrose, or they know Chris Jericho. Now, for the other side of everything here, you would have the elite to go along with that. And in the terms of the elite, you have and some other particular independent names as well that you expect the hardcores to truthfully know these people, such as Kenny Omega, Cody. And you can even throw Cody almost onto a mainstream area for people who remember him from his WWE days. Yes, I know I'm making mention to them, considering them mainstream, because that is one aspect that I don't think they're trying to fully go and try to grasp the mainstream. But in the terms of garnering more people, I won't say you have to become more mainstream, but you got to get people to know these names more in the mainstream. So people like Jericho, like Moxley, and maybe potentially Cody to go along with that. I feel like those would be people that they would know from their past in WWE. But people like Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Adam Hangman Page, and countless others. I would even throw Santana or Ortiz in there, because I think that a great amount of people know about these particular guys. Still, in the terms of even in the hardcore wrestling area, and maybe a few people who are like casually into wrestling would probably know guys like these, and also Pentagon Jr. and Rey Fenix for people who have been watching Lucha Underground. That's a little bit more niche than anything to go along with that, but if you're also familiar with AAA, you probably know those guys. And then you kind of got the rest of them, where yes, they've been around independents, and this is where you go to the people who are super hardcore about everything. But for the most part, even for the hardcore wrestling fans, they're probably getting exposed to the first time to a guy like a Darby Allin, to Jungle Boy, Luchasaurus, Orange Cassidy, Trent and Beretta, and a bunch of these other guys. And then of course also on the female side, you have probably a lot of people who are getting exposed to Riho for the first time. Hikaru Shida, Nyla Rose, Britt Baker, all of them. And for the most part, you're getting them exposed to them for the first time in any type of watching. Like, probably the fewest amount of people know who those people are to go along with that. And honestly, I feel like a lot of things that have been going on in this show have made things really good, and they've brought a lot of those talents that you might not necessarily know about in any way, shape, or form, such as the Darby Allins, especially anything you've seen with Chris Jericho, because that has been great so far. Anything that you see with Chris Jericho has been absolutely fantastic to the creating of the Inner Circle and everything to go along with that. Yes, his La Champion celebration, or his Thanksgiving Day celebration, it was kind of like the Festival of Friendship was back in the WWE days, but it was also still good in its own right to go along with that. Also, you're getting exposed to a new talent such as Sammy Guevara. They have Jake Hager or Jack Swagger as part of that group as well. The Inner Circle stuff has been really good, especially with this feud with Cody right off the bat. And you feel like that they're going after the Elite in every way, shape, or form, and they're going to a pretty much a big match, and they've already kind of teased it, calling it the match beyond on that particular side of everything. Santana Ortiz's stuff with the Bucks, I think, has been really good as well. Their match at Full Gear, I thought, was really good. The street fight that they had as well, I thought came off really good to go along with that. I think the only thing that people may have been surprised about throughout this entire time, because I think Chris Jericho is a very good first AEW champion. He is definitely their biggest star on the show itself, and then I would say Moxley maybe next on those particular ones. And people are still kind of getting used to the rest of the Elites and everything, and all the other people to go along with that. But Jericho, again, to go back to Jericho here, has surprisingly helped out newer talent that wasn't necessarily going up with the Elite or anything like that. He's been wrestling people such as Darby Allin, Jungle Boy, to go along with it, and making more of a bringing their star level and their stock up more in those particular matches by yes winning those matches, but doing them in such a way that it looked like that those guys were going to be able to beat him in some way, shape, or form, especially in the Darby Allin match, because that was for the AEW title. And then also the Jungle Boy match, which was a 10-minute challenge without it being the actual title being on the line. And technically Jungle Boy won that one because he did survive the 10 minutes to go along with it. Those things have been really good in bringing those people up, and I feel like there's a lot of people saying Luchasaurus is definitely going to be something big in that company. I could definitely see that being the case along with that on that particular side. And honestly, anything with the Inner Circle has been very good so far on those particular ones. I think the stuff with the Dark Order coming in has been better. It's been a lot better since they've started working with those video packages and everything like that. The Dark Order right off the bat was kind of like, huh? What are these guys about? Everything to go along with that. And and Evil Uno, and I believe the other one is Grayson. At this point in time, I'm bad with names, so sorry about that. I am absolutely bad with names. I'll be learning those things over any videos that I'll be doing. And in all honesty with that one, it was kind of like I said before, it was kind of, huh? What's going on here? And then they, become number one, or not number one contenders, but they get the number one seed in the tournament. They get a bye for the tag team titles. They end up losing inside of that tournament, and they don't even go to the finals to set up the tag team titles. That goes to the Lucha Brothers in SCU, which SCU ended up winning that one, which I think a lot of people were perplexed by SCU winning that tag team title tournament. I think it was definitely a good choice in the end, but I'll go further off on whether or not another team may need to have those tag team titles at this point in time. But honestly, SCU was a good choice right off the bat with those ones. But going back to the Dark Order, I don't think they really picked up until the last month or so when they started doing videos of Join Dark Order, of doing this Join the Dark Order, and also Evil Uno making particular gestures to people who say they're going to join the Dark Order, like towards fans, like they create like a small video or anything like that. Then you saw the video within the hotel room. Things like that have been really good in actually bringing into what the Dark Order actually is to go along with that. Now, this also leads to a slight problem with the company, that they have a couple of different factions that seem to be very dark and ominous. So you have the Dark Order, that's kind of like the cult, kind of like a cult-esque area. But you also have another one that may even be going in there. It's being started by Brandy Rhodes, which is the Nightmare Collective. So she's been starting the Nightmare Collective. She has Awesome Kong, and then there's two others in there. There's another female, which her name is slipping my mind right now, but they're playing off of a little bit more of the Chris Statlander stuff on that one, which I'll get into that in a brief moment as well. On that side, because I do of course have some gripes, because I don't think there's any program out there that's without fault, and AEW is definitely that. But you're getting a lot of groups, and you're getting a lot of heel groups that have like these very dark, ominous themes to them. You've got at least two. The Inner Circle, you kind of get where they're going with that. You got you have Chris Jericho, top guy. Then you have Sammy Guevara, who's like his buddy, and then you have the tag team with Santana Ortiz, and then you have the Muscle with Jake Hager. You kind of get where they're going with that. They're the inner circle of the people who are going to try to take over AEW on that one. But you have Dark Order, who's like a cult, and we're still trying to see where this Nightmare Collective thing is going right now with Brandy Rhodes to go along with that. And I think you're getting into a point that you're having factions, but are they virtually the same style of factions at this point in time? There's, I guess, outside of the Elite, you could kind of call them a faction on that one. That you don't really have a face faction at this point, outside of, I guess, the Elite. And you're getting kind of a lot of the same things with these other areas. Like the Nightmare Collective and Dark Order, I'm still waiting to see where they're going. I know Dark Order's just kind of started something with the Young Bucks at this point. And Nightmare Collective is kind of doing something where they're trying to get Chris Statlander to join them, but she's refusing to at this point in time as well. So we'll see where both of those end up going. But that is kind of an area where there's a little bit of a gripe, where it's like you got these factions, but they kind of are themed the same to go along with that. Now, wrestling-wise on these shows, I think... I honestly think a lot of these matches are pretty good. It is still in the aspect of TV, and I still think one of my other gripes on these particular ones is their timing. I think their timing, in the terms of the TV show itself, is off. Not in the terms of the timing of the matches, but in the timing of booking the show as a whole for the 2 hours. They are just off just a little bit, because certain main event matches feel like they're a little bit less than at this point in time, and that's based off of they either have some kind of abrupt end or something to go along with that. I don't feel like the timing of those matches, especially on the main event side, whether they go out there late or something like that, they seem to be a little bit off. So I still feel like they're learning their timing a little bit. Let's not also fully get into the aspect of those audio issues that we've seen a few times as well to go along with it. Now, don't get me wrong, I like the aspect that they're not a clean wrestling show, but something like audio issues, that's kind of that doesn't fall into that grittier feel and grittier look of it. It just doesn't work out in that particular area. But like the other vibe and everything of the show, I like the fact that it's kind of a little bit grittier, a little bit darker. It doesn't have a massive clean feel, such as like a WWE show. Does with those particular ones. They have a cleanness, a brightness to them. This one has more of a grit feel to it, and I kind of like that. But the audio issues that they've had, where either the audio's been out or it's been really weird, those are not that good. But again, I give them a little bit of credit on the aspect of that because they're still relatively new, and a lot of these guys are probably learning this stuff on the fly to begin with, especially for weekly television, because for the most part, I think only Cody, and he's been out of it for a good period of time. Jon Moxley and Chris Jericho really only know about, are the only ones that truthfully know about weekly television in any way, shape, or form on there. And of course, I believe they have some decent people backstage that can kind of lead them into the right directions to go along with that. So that's kind of a little bit of a gripe that I do have. Another gripe that I have at this point in time is the women's division as a whole. And it's not that they're having bad matches in every sense of that word. I feel like they just don't have enough exposure to them. Now, let's bring this into the fact that they do have two shows, one being, of course, AEW Dynamite, and the other one being AEW Dark, which appears on the All Elite Wrestling, or the All Elite Wrestling YouTube page on Tuesday nights. That is a good thing to try to get a little bit more exposure on that particular side. I do like the fact that they have two separate shows, and you do have to go to two different areas or two different areas to necessarily watch it, and everything to go along with that. It does give it a different vibe and a different feel, even though it has the same background and everything from the other shows. Sorry, I'm going to sniffle and try to clear my throat a little bit on these particular ones because I'm not fully 100% while making this video, but we'll try not to cough or anything like that on that side of everything. But I do like that aspect, and I think that will help out the women's division down the line because I think they do have a good women's division so far. I'm not the biggest fan of Riho at this point. And it's not an aspect of it, oh, she doesn't show up or anything like that. I think she's had some bookings over in Japan to go along with that. So that has nothing really to do with it. I just she falls in that aspect of believability for me, and she just doesn't seem believable on those particular ones, and she also it just doesn't ring anything with me with Riho on those particular side of it. I guess in the terms of the underdog champion, someone being a smaller stature or anything like that, the underdog champion, it was kind of weird that they went with that for the first champion. I know she's had a lot of experience and been wrestling since about 9 years old over in Japan to go along with it, but I feel like they could have gone with somebody different for their first champion of the women's division on that one. And I feel like Riho down the line should have probably been somebody that had been built up to eventually win the title to go along with it. But they didn't really fully tell that underdog story with that particular one, because she's, even though she's in smaller stature and usually having to fight back in each match, she's been winning almost every match. She's only been pinned once in the company, and that was right before Full Gear to go along with that. But I feel like their women's division is getting a lot better. From what I've seen, people like Shayna, you have Chris Statlander, you also have Big Swole. Those have been most recent additions. Awesome Kong, I would like to see what they're going to do a little bit more with her. Hikaru Shida, I think, is really good as well to go along with that. Nyla Rose is definitely somebody else that I feel that's it has a good spot in there, but you also have Awesome Kong, who's kind of like Nyla Rose, where they're, the person who's of a larger stature inside of the women's division that could play that particular monster style role. So you kind of have two people that do that at this point in time to go along with it. But honestly, I feel like their women's division has been lackluster so far, and I feel like it's getting better. It's not quite where it needs to be quite yet on that particular side of everything. Now, I do have another gripe with the show. And this actually has nothing necessarily to, well, it does actually have something to do with AEW Dynamite. It's the aspect that on Dynamite, for AEW's Dynamite, you have to watch the Being the Elite show. You have to almost watch Being the Elite or other particular YouTube shows to fully get the storylines. And I'm not talking about AEW Dark or anything like that, but I mean, I'm talking about the other YouTube shows, such as the Road Twos shows and everything, to get the particular storylines and to actually get the whole story of what's actually happening at this point in time in the actual shows themselves. Because we've had moments like, if you watch Being the Elite, you would know Adam Hangman Page has not been part of the Elite outside of teaming with Kenny Omega, but he hasn't really been hanging with them for about a month at this point in time. And then they kind of make a brief mention of it over commentary. Like, there's a lot of things that happen on Being the Elite that tell stories going into matches for AEW Dynamite or for the pay-per-views themselves that don't even get mentioned by commentary. There was a brief glimpse of commentary for saying that Adam Hangman Page was not part of the Elite anymore. And they just says, like, as you know, that Adam Page is not part of the Elite anymore. It's like, well, if you don't watch Being the Elite, you don't know that on that particular side. So I feel like their storytelling in certain areas, I feel like it makes sense, but if you watch Being the Elite along with AEW Dynamite and AEW Dark, you kind of get it. But if you're not going to be watching something like Being the Elite and you're just watching the wrestling programs, you might end up getting lost on some of these particulars and particular storylines, everything to go along with that as well. So I do think their storytelling is just a little bit off. It makes sense if you watch it all, but honestly, for the TNT show, you shouldn't be going over to YouTube to have to get more storyline from a different channel itself. Now, it would make more sense if it was all on All Elite Wrestling's YouTube channel. I think that would make a little bit more sense on it. But you have to not only go to AEW's YouTube channel for AEW Dark, you have TNT for AEW Dynamite. But now, like, to get more areas, you have to go to Being the Elite, which is the Young Bucks channel. And then you also have to go to another channel, which I forget what that one is because I haven't really watched that yet, where a lot of the other Road Twos happen. That's run by Cody as well. And that's not done on that aspect, and it kind of jumbles up their storylines to go along with it. Another area that they kind of messed up on storyline wise, and now let's get this right. It's a good thing that AEW is allowing for independent bookings and everything to go along with that, and they honor those independent bookings. And I feel like this would have gotten out, but they had a perfect storyline excuse for this upcoming January 1st show with the AEW Women's Championship match. It was supposed to be Chris Statlander versus Riho. And now it's been changed to a fatal four-way with Nyla Rose, Britt Baker, and Hikaru Shida going up against Riho for the AEW Women's Championship. They had a perfect way, at least in their storyline area, of getting themselves out of it, out of this particular match. And they decided to go the other route. Now, again, I feel like this would have eventually come out through social media or anything like that. But they made mention, it's like, due to a prior commitment, Chris Statlander was not going to be not going to be able to compete on the January 1st show. She's going to face the winner of this fatal four-way match the next week to go along with that. But right before, or right after her number one contendership match with Britt Baker, you had her decline the Nightmare Collective with Brandy, and Brandy hit her in the eye with a heel, like the heel portion of a shoe, which they could have done that injury angle. Again, I think it would have just gotten out eventually that she had a booking and was going to be doing that. But at least in your area where probably not too many people are going to know about that particular booking, they could have told a story. It's like, hey, she's not going to be cleared this week. She's going to be cleared next week for a match because of that eye injury. They could have done a nice little storyline angle, but they decided to go the aspect of saying that she had a prior commitment when you had a simple out to go along with it. And I think that would have made for a much more interesting story down the line as well, because now it just seems like she's okay after getting hit in the eye by the heel of a shoe. Now she's just okay to fully go, but she has a prior commitment, so she can't be here on that one. You could have worked a little bit more of the story in that, and you could have worked more of that angle going into the Nightmare Collective side of everything as well for what she would be going up against. But I'm not saying that that's completely gone or anything to go along with that, but they had that chance of playing that off, but they was like, nah, let's not do that. So I feel like certain areas of storytelling are just a little bit off at this point. But, I mean, overall, as a whole, I've been enjoying AEW. I made mention to wrestling matches themselves. I feel like a lot of the matches on the show are at least fairly decent. On those ones to being really good or really enjoyable. Not necessarily overly great quite yet, but they're building up newer stars, which I think is a good thing. I may mention that before. They are trying to build up different stars and everything to go along with that. I think Chris Jericho has been doing a great job of that so far as well on that side of everything. And overall, wrestling content-wise, and I think storytelling-wise as well, even though I say they have some issues with it, which they do, I think it's still been relatively good. I mean, the storyline with Chris Jericho and Cody going into Full Gear and everything with MJF after the fact to go along with that has been really good. That's been good storytelling and everything to go along with that. I've actually enjoyed the story of the Young Bucks going up against Santana Ortiz, the whole aspect of Kenny Omega versus John Moxley. I'm not the biggest fan of those style of hardcore matches, but the way they told the story and everything, it made sense that they had to have a match like that because you got that feeling that they didn't like each other, which I said during the Full Gear review. I'm not a big fan of those style matches, but I thought that match made sense. And since it made sense for them to go for that style of match, it actually made it come off better on that particular one to go along with it. And like I said, I feel like it's done pretty good so far. There's obviously some growing pains with it as well. And we'll see where it continues on going because it's still grasping my attention. One thing that I usually say is for a new wrestling show, when I start getting into it, I give it 3 months, to try to get a grasp of the stories, the wrestlers, anything like that, who's babyface, who's heel, everything to go on that particular side. And see where they are after 3 months and whether or not I'm going to keep watching or anything go along with that. Well, I'm here to say I'm going to keep watching. Is it without flaw? No, by any stretch of the imagination. But they've been doing a pretty good job so far, and I think it should be very interesting to see where they go down the line as well with this particular one. That is everything I've got on, basically on my chest right now about AEW Dynamite, how I feel about it, where it's been going since it started. It's been about 3 months now. So I thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video and me explaining how I feel about AEW Dynamite, please give it a share, like, subscribe, anything that you could do to try to support the channel on that one. I hope you guys take care today. Take care. Peace out. Have a great rest of your evening.